Hey everyone, I'm Rochelle Moses and I'm a relationship coach helping people build and rebuild relationships with themselves and others. A common result that a lot of people experience after domestic violence is regret about the relationship. They regret being in the relationship, they regret staying in the relationship, they regret not reaching out to people. Over the past decade, I've done a lot of personal work to get over the regrets and similar feelings that I had about my abusive relationships that I was in whenever I was a teenager. And today, there's really only one regret that I still have, and I haven't really quite been able to get over yet. In January of 2011, I was a freshman in college. I had just gotten back to campus to start the spring semester, and I was walking to class and my mom called me telling me that my grandma had passed away. Her health had been declining. She suffered from Alzheimer's and had lived with us for the past few years. And so it wasn't sudden, we knew it was coming, but it was still very difficult to deal with. She was the only grandparent I had known my whole life, and a lot of my childhood memories revolved around her. A lot of those couple of days is kind of a blur, but I do remember finished walking to class and telling my professor that, I just found out that my grandma died and I couldn't stay in class. I had to figure out how to get home. And then I flew home by myself because my mom didn't want me making the 4-hour drive. She was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to drive safely. So I flew home and my brother picked me up from the airport, and it was January, so it was very cold and snowy and icy in Pittsburgh, and our plane almost had to land in Baltimore instead of Pittsburgh. So getting back home for her funeral was really difficult. And my boyfriend at the time drove in from his college to attend her funeral, and his parents were there. And very shortly into her viewing at the funeral home, where, I needed to be with my family, he had told me that him and his parents wanted to take me out to dinner so that they could see me and spend time with me before we all went our separate ways and went back to college and tried to get back to normal. And I was still a teenager at the time. I was 18 and I didn't really think anything of it. And I was so enmeshed in that controlling and manipulative relationship that I didn't see a problem with leaving my family at my grandmother's funeral to go to dinner with my boyfriend and his parents. And so I went up to my mom and I asked her if it was okay. And I can't really speak for her, but I think she was just so defeated, both with the situation of losing her mom and just being tired of trying to fight me on things involving this relationship. So she said she didn't have a problem with me going. And I went to dinner with him and his parents and left my family at my grandmother's funeral. And then they dropped me off at home afterwards, and I thought everything was normal, everything was fine. I didn't see any kind of problem with that. Then, a year or two later, once I ended the relationship, I finally started to see things more clearly and think back and have a lot of clarity on just how bad things were. So just thinking back on my grandma's funeral, I always felt just this pit in my stomach, just feeling awful and horrible about leaving my mom and my brother and my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, leaving them there and acting like this was just a normal trip home where I went out to dinner with my boyfriend and his parents. And it was a terrible feeling. And then quite a few years later, like probably 5 or 6 years later, my mom and I were on vacation with our families and my current boyfriend, and her and I were walking along the beach, and I told her that this was a huge regret of mine and I felt awful about it. And, she told me that she knew it wasn't my fault. She knew it wasn't really me that made the decision to leave the funeral. And she doesn't blame me. She doesn't hold any sort of resentment or negative feelings towards me, but it's still a very hard thing to think back on, that is something that I'll never be able to get back, is that time with my family in that time of need and time where we should have been coming together. So this just kind of goes to show that the kind of power and manipulation that these types of relationships can have over you, that you make decisions that you don't even really fully think about. And even though I'm like 12 or 13 years out of that relationship, there's still some things that are really hard to think about and to talk about. And that's okay, because, you know, healing is a process. Healing isn't linear, and healing takes a lot of time. And I will say that I don't feel good about this event or situation still to this day, but I do feel a little bit better about it than I used to. I don't hold nearly as much anger towards myself about making those decisions, because I know that I was almost essentially brainwashed into making those decisions, and that it wasn't really 100% me making those decisions. So I will continue to do the work and continue to process these feelings, and eventually I'll be able to let go of the regret.